David sat alone in his Las Vegas apartment, the city lights flickering through the window like distant promises. He was in his mid-50s, a bookkeeper by trade, organized and methodical in his work, but his personal life had been anything but. Years of dating in America had left him weary, tired of the endless games, the swipes, the hollow conversations that led nowhere. He wanted something different, something real. It was a Saturday evening when his life took an unexpected turn. He was mindlessly scrolling through YouTube, watching videos on finance and retirement strategies, when a recommendation caught his eye. Finding Love Abroad: Why American Men Are Dating Traditional Women in the Philippines. Curiosity got the best of him, and he clicked. The video opened with scenes of white, sandy beaches, smiling faces, and couples strolling hand in hand. Men, many of them around his age, spoke about how their lives had changed after finding love in the Philippines. They talked about tradition, respect, family values, qualities David felt had been fading back home. He watched intently as one man, a retired engineer from Texas, described how he met his wife during a trip to Cebu. He talked about how she was kind, loyal, and grateful for even the simplest gestures. It struck a chord in David's heart. He began diving deeper into the community, watching video after video, reading testimonials, and exploring dating websites that specialized in connecting Western men with Filipina women. His skepticism slowly melted away as he saw story after story of seemingly genuine connections. He began to wonder, could this be the answer? Fueled by curiosity and a growing sense of hope, David created a profile on one of the sites. He was honest about his age, his work, and his desire for something meaningful. He uploaded a photo of himself, salt and pepper hair, clean-shaven, wearing a button-down shirt. He looked respectable, solid, a man who had worked hard his whole life and was ready to share it with someone special. It didn't take long before the messages started pouring in. Most were polite introductions, short greetings, but one stood out, a young woman named Maria. She was in her early 20s, living in Cebu and working as a maid at a local hotel. Her profile picture showed her with long black hair, a soft smile, and warm eyes. Her message was simple. "Hello, David. It's nice to meet you. How is life in America?" David felt a flutter of excitement he hadn't experienced in years. He replied quickly, eager to learn more. Their conversations began casually, talking about work, family, and the differences between their lives. Maria shared how she took care of her 2 children, her parents, and her younger siblings, all while working long hours. Despite her struggles, she spoke with optimism and grace. It drew him in. 3 weeks passed with messages and video chats that became more frequent and more personal. David felt like he was discovering something new, a connection that felt pure and untainted by the cynicism he'd grown accustomed to. She made him laugh, asked about his day, shared her dreams, and when she shyly opened up about her financial hardships, he didn't hesitate. He wanted to help. He wanted to be her hero. For the first time in a long while, David found purpose beyond the spreadsheets and ledgers that dominated his days. He began sending Maria money to help with her bills, her children, and her family. It felt good. It felt right. And when she thanked him with heartfelt gratitude and promises of devotion, he believed her. 2 months into their connection, David made a decision. He was going to Cebu to meet her in person. He booked the ticket, packed his bags, and prepared for the journey that would change his life forever. The air was thick and humid as David stepped out of Mactan Cebu International Airport. The buzz of car horns, the chatter of locals, and the scent of street food sizzling on open grills greeted him like a chaotic symphony. He adjusted his carry-on bag and scanned the crowd nervously, searching for the familiar face he had only seen through the glow of a screen. And then he saw her, Maria, waving eagerly from the edge of the crowd, her smile as bright as the morning sun. She wore a simple yellow sundress that fluttered in the breeze, and beside her stood a cluster of family members, her parents, her 2 children, and even a younger brother who couldn't have been older than 10. David's heart skipped a beat. She was real. They were real. "David!" she called out, her voice cutting through the noise. He hurried over, his suitcase clattering behind him, and before he could utter a word, Maria embraced him tightly. He felt the warmth of her body press against his, her arms wrapping around his back, like she never wanted to let go. For a moment he was speechless, overwhelmed by the sincerity in her hug. She pulled back, her eyes shining with tears. "You're really here?" David smiled, his voice cracking slightly. "I'm really here." They exchanged greetings with her family, shaking hands and offering awkward bows. Her father nodded approvingly, her mother smiled shyly, and the children giggled as they looked up at the tall American. Maria's parents spoke little English, but their kindness was clear in their gestures and gentle pats on his shoulder. The days that followed were a blur of warmth and connection. Maria had taken time off work to show him around Cebu. She led him through the bustling markets, where vendors called out prices in rapid Cebuano, through narrow alleyways lined with makeshift homes, and along the white sand beaches that stretched out under the sun's watchful gaze. They spent hours talking about his life in America, her dreams of a better future, and the possibilities that lay ahead. Maria clung to his arm everywhere they went, gazing up at him with adoration that made David feel something he hadn't felt in years. Wanted. Needed. She would laugh at his jokes, even when they weren't funny, rest her head on his shoulder when they sat together, and tell him how lucky she felt to have met someone as kind as him. It stirred something deep inside David, something primal and affirming. He felt like a protector, a provider, a man. Her family welcomed him with open arms, preparing large meals each evening, grilled fish, pork adobo, and steaming bowls of rice that were always accompanied by laughter and stories. They sat on woven mats, sharing food with their hands, and David found himself smiling more than he had in years. He wasn't just an outsider looking in, he was part of it, part of them. Maria's children clung to him, calling him Uncle David, giggling as he handed them small toys he'd brought from America. He would ruffle their hair, smile, and feel his heart swell with pride when they looked at him with innocent admiration. He wasn't just helping Maria, he was helping them. He was building something real. At night, Maria would curl up beside him in the small room he rented, resting her head on his chest and tracing lazy circles with her finger across his arm. She would whisper sweet things to him in Cebuano, words he didn't understand, but felt deeply. Her presence was soft, nurturing, and fiercely loyal, or so it seemed. David was smitten, his heart swelling with each passing day. He hadn't felt this alive in decades. She needed him, and he was more than willing to be the man she could rely on. For the first time in a long while, David was happy. He had found his purpose. And when the 2 weeks came to an end, he kissed her goodbye at the airport, promising her he would be back soon. More than that, he would bring her to America, where she and her children would have a new life, one that he would provide. Maria wiped her eyes, nodding tearfully as she clutched his hands. "I will wait for you, David," she whispered. "I will always wait." He boarded his plane with a heart full of hope and a purpose clearer than ever before. He was going to start the visa process. He was going to bring her home. And life, for the first time in a long while, made sense. The plane touched down at McCarran International Airport with a shudder, and Maria's hands clutched the armrests as the wheels screeched against the runway. Her heart raced with excitement and nerves as the flight attendant's voice crackled over the intercom, welcoming passengers to Las Vegas. She gazed out the small window at the sprawling cityscape, shimmering under the desert sun, towers of glass and steel reaching toward the sky, neon lights flickering even in daylight. It was a world away from Cebu. David was waiting for her just past the security gate, holding a bouquet of red roses and wearing a grin that stretched wide across his face. When she spotted him, Maria hurried forward, her suitcase bouncing behind her, and fell into his arms. He held her tightly, whispering, "Welcome to your new life." David didn't just welcome Maria to Las Vegas. He welcomed her into his home, a modest but well-kept 2-bedroom house in Henderson, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood with palm trees swaying gently in the breeze. He had spent weeks preparing it for her arrival, repainting the guest room, clearing closet space, even buying soft pink towels and floral-scented soaps to make her feel more comfortable. Everything was new to Maria. The carpeted floors, the dishwasher, the constant hum of air conditioning. David walked her through each room like a proud husband showing off their first home. "This is your home now, too," he said warmly. And when he showed her the new iPhone he'd left on the kitchen counter, still in its box, tied with a red ribbon, her eyes lit up like a child on Christmas morning. Soon after settling in, Maria got a job as a nursing home assistant. David was proud of her initiative. When she told him she wanted to contribute and help support her family back in Cebu, it touched him deeply. "I want to earn something for myself," she said sweetly. "You've done so much for me already." When she began picking up extra shifts, especially when David was traveling for out-of-state bookkeeping clients, he admired her drive. But what David didn't know was that Maria had created a second social media account, one he wasn't allowed to follow. The account he did know about was filled with sweet pictures of food, sunsets, and carefully filtered shots of her smiling face, shared with her family and friends from back home. But the second account told a different story. That account came alive after dark. It began with curiosity, scrolling through local event pages, watching Vegas influencers flaunt their lavish nights, glittering heels, and after-party stories. One flyer in particular caught her eye, a rooftop event with open bar access, celebrity DJs, and free entry for ladies before midnight. She couldn't resist. She said she was working overtime at the nursing home. That night, she met Brian. He was in his early 30s, with a magnetic confidence and a devilish grin. He bought her a drink and made her laugh. He knew everyone. He danced like he lived on the rhythm. And most importantly, he didn't ask questions. Brian introduced her to a world David had warned her about, the seductive pulse of Las Vegas after midnight. Rooftop lounges, neon-lit orgies disguised as parties, private rooms with camera-free zones. She didn't jump in all at once. It started with drinks, then pills, then money for more than just dancing. Every night she went out, she told David she had another double shift, another urgent patient, another chance to send more pesos back home. David, worn from his own work and frequent travel, never questioned her. He trusted her. And while David thought she was serving food and changing linens, Maria was out filming content for her growing secret account, posing with designer cocktails, laughing with strangers, dancing under strobes. Brian often made appearances in her videos, always close to her, his hand always somewhere possessive. Her phone never left her hand. It was her window to this new world, her stage, her lifeline. She lived for the comments, the DMs, the validation. It was a drug. And Las Vegas, with its flashing lights and endless appetite, was the dealer. David didn't know it yet, but the woman he had brought into his home, the one he believed was saving for her family, was already gone, lost to a version of herself even she didn't recognize. It started with a late-night phone call. David had just gotten back from a week-long trip to Austin, Texas, where he'd attended a financial systems training for independent bookkeepers. He was tired, jet-lagged, and looking forward to collapsing into bed beside Maria. But when he walked into the house, something felt off. Maria wasn't home. That in itself wasn't unusual. She'd mentioned working a late shift at the nursing home, but it was the tone in her voice during their last call that lingered in his mind. She sounded distracted, almost like she was whispering. When he'd asked if everything was all right, she had quickly reassured him, then rushed off the phone. David poured himself a drink, sat down at the kitchen table, and waited. Midnight turned to 2 a.m. No call, no text. When she finally walked through the door at 3:17 a.m., she looked startled to see him home. Her makeup was smudged, her hair was tousled, and her nurse scrubs looked untouched. "I thought you said you were staying in Austin until Sunday," she said, trying to force a smile. "I got an early flight," he replied, watching her closely. "Everything okay?" "Just tired," she muttered. "Crazy shift." He didn't push it. Not yet. But the seed was planted. Over the next few weeks, David became increasingly uneasy. Something wasn't right. Maria was constantly texting, leaving the room to take calls from her mom and turning her phone screen away whenever he glanced over. She often came home after midnight claiming back-to-back shifts, but her nursing shoes remained spotless, and her scrubs hung untouched in the closet. David tried to brush it off. He wanted to trust her. He had to. But one evening, while she showered, her phone buzzed on the dresser, and instinct overrode trust. He picked it up. It was locked. She had never locked her phone before. That night, David sat in bed long after Maria had fallen asleep, his mind spiraling. The woman who had once clung to his arm in Cebu, who cried when he promised to bring her to America, now seemed distant, disconnected. He thought of the thousands of dollars he'd spent, the credit cards, the immigration paperwork, the rent, the car, and the late nights she claimed were for the family. He needed answers. 1 week later, while Maria was at work, David installed a small GPS tracker underneath her car. He told himself it was just for peace of mind. He wasn't accusing her, just verifying. What he found left him numb. The tracker led him not to the nursing home, but to luxury condos, nightclub parking lots, and hotel driveways in the heart of the Strip. On one night, her car sat parked outside a high-rise for 5 hours. The next night, it was at a hotel near Fremont Street until dawn. His stomach turned. David took it a step further. He installed hidden cameras in the house, motion-triggered, discreet, tucked into corners and vents. Then, with calm calculation, he created a plan. He told Maria he'd be flying to Denver for a conference. In reality, he stayed in Las Vegas, parked a few blocks from the house, watching the camera feeds from his tablet. That night, he saw everything. Maria returned home around 10 p.m., not alone. Brian followed her in, shirt unbuttoned, a beer in hand. Moments later, a third man entered. David watched in silence as they laughed, turned up music, and made themselves at home. It got worse. In his bed, they undressed her. There was no protection. They drank. They used drugs. They took turns. David watched it all, his breath shallow, his fists clenched. His heart didn't break. It collapsed. He closed the tablet, sat in his car, and stared at the ceiling. Everything he'd given, everything he'd built, everything he believed, gone. David didn't sleep that night. He didn't eat the next day. He sat and watched the footage again and again, numb, hollow, unraveling. And something inside him snapped. He was no longer the gentle bookkeeper from Henderson. He was a man with nothing left to lose. And Maria, laughing in his bed with another man's hand in her hair, had no idea what was coming. The morning after David watched the footage, the world felt eerily quiet. Sunlight streamed through the windows of his car, as if nothing had changed, as if the universe had no clue it had just been shattered. He sat there, the tablet in his lap, replaying the same scene from the night before over and over. Maria's laughter, Brian's hands, the stranger's voice, the bedroom, his bedroom, where he had once imagined a future with her, now desecrated and defiled. The part of David that wanted to cry was already gone. What remained was something colder, methodical, focused. By the time the sun had fully risen, he had already mapped out his plan. He waited 2 more days. He smiled when she came home. He kissed her forehead. He cooked her favorite meals. He asked her how work was and nodded when she told him she was picking up more shifts. She kissed his cheek and disappeared into the bathroom, not knowing he could still smell the cologne of another man on her hair. On Friday morning, David told Maria he was flying to Mexico City for a weekend bookkeeping seminar. She barely looked up from her phone when she told him, "Be safe." "I'll be gone until Monday," he said. "You'll have the house to yourself." She smiled. "I'll get some sleep finally." That night, she didn't sleep, and neither did David. He parked his car at a 24-hour diner down the street and watched the camera feeds again. At 10:42 p.m., Maria arrived home. She didn't come alone. Brian again, and a new man David didn't recognize. David watched them laugh and drink and snort white powder off his coffee table. He watched them unzip her dress and lift her onto the kitchen counter. He watched them take turns again. She never checked the cameras. She never checked the locks. She never suspected. David waited until 1:00 a.m. Then he got out of the car, pulled on a dark hoodie, and walked back toward the house. Every step he took felt like it belonged to someone else. He let himself in through the back door, quiet, slow. He moved down the hallway, past the family portraits, past the framed photo of him and Maria on a beach in Cebu. Then he heard her moan. He didn't hesitate. He entered the bedroom, raised the pistol, and fired. Brian turned first, his eyes wide with shock, but the bullet tore through his throat before he could say a word. The other man tried to run, but David shot him in the back. He collapsed against the closet door. Maria screamed, her body trembling, naked, crawling backward on the bed, shaking her head, stammering, "David, please, please!" But all David could hear was the sound of her voice whispering another man's name. He pulled the trigger one more time. Then he dropped the gun. The silence that followed was deafening. He walked into the bathroom and looked at himself in the mirror. His face was pale, splattered with blood, eyes empty. He looked like a ghost. He walked out of the house, got in his car, and drove. No destination, no plan, just the hum of tires against the road and the weight of something he could never come back from. By dawn, the cops were already looking for him. Security cameras caught him on the highway. A gas station clerk identified him by his photo. They found his car idling near the Mexican border. Empty. But David wasn't running to escape justice. He was running because he no longer knew who he was. When the police cornered him just outside of Nogales, he stepped out of the car with the gun in his hand. He didn't raise it. He didn't aim. He just stood there. A shot cracked through the desert air, then another, and David, the man who had given everything for love, fell to the ground, his eyes open, staring into nothing. The house on Desert Willow Lane was never lived in again. Neighbors said they still hear screaming from time to time. Others say the cameras never stopped recording. But in the end, it was just another Vegas story, one built on hope and destroyed by betrayal. David had only wanted one thing, love, not the kind he could swipe through or negotiate with over brunch dates and small talk. He wanted something real, something traditional, something pure. He watched those YouTube videos late into the night, listening to other men speak of their joy, their peace, their second chances. And he believed, truly believed, that in the warmth of a Filipina's love, he might finally find the kind of devotion that had always eluded him. He found Maria, and for a time he thought he'd found everything. But what he really found was illusion, and he paid for it. Not just with his finances, not just with his heart, not just with his trust, his dignity, his sanity, but with his life. David didn't die because he was a bad man. He died because he loved too deeply, trusted too blindly, gave too much. And in the end, it consumed him. And somewhere, in the dust of a forgotten Las Vegas street, his story fades, another quiet tragedy in the loudest city on earth. A cautionary tale, a broken heart in the land of neon lights. A man who only wanted to be loved,